Disney didn't run out of stories. It turned stories into content. For nearly a century, Disney was not just an entertainment company. It was the place where childhood became memory, the place where characters became family, the place where movies became rituals, the place where a song, a castle, a hero, or a single animated scene could stay inside a person's mind for decades. That was Disney's real power. Not just animation, not just theme parks, not just franchises. The power was emotional ownership. Disney did not simply make people watch. It made people remember. And memory is one of the strongest business models in the world. Because when a company owns your childhood, it does not have to sell to you only once. It can sell to you for the rest of your life. A movie becomes a toy becomes a costume becomes a park visit becomes a family tradition. A family tradition becomes a new generation of customers. That was the machine. And for decades, it looked almost impossible to break. But then Disney made one of the most dangerous mistakes a powerful entertainment empire can make. It started treating stories like inventory. More shows, more sequels, more spin-offs, more franchises, more streaming originals, more universes, more content to feed the platform. At first, it looked like the future. Disney had the brands. Disney had the characters. Disney had the libraries. Disney had Marvel. Disney had Pixar. Disney had Star Wars. Disney had Hulu. Disney had ESPN. Disney had theme parks. Disney had one of the strongest emotional engines ever built. So when streaming became the new battlefield, Disney did what every empire does when it feels threatened. It spent, it expanded, it tried to be everywhere. But there was a hidden problem. Stories are not valuable because they exist. Stories are valuable because people care, and caring cannot be mass-produced. That is the content trap. The more Disney produced, the more it risked making magic feel ordinary. The more it expanded its universes, the more the universes started feeling like homework. The more it pushed content into the streaming machine, the more audiences began to feel overwhelmed. And when entertainment becomes overwhelming, people do not always watch more. Sometimes they care less. This is not just a story about Disney. It is a story about brand psychology, consumer behavior, money, power, and the danger of confusing abundance with value. Disney's problem was not that audiences stopped loving entertainment. The problem was that Disney trained audiences to expect endless entertainment. And when something becomes endless, it stops feeling special. For years, Disney had mastered scarcity. A movie release felt like an event. A theatrical premiere mattered. A new Pixar film felt emotional. A new Marvel movie felt connected to a larger cultural moment. A Star Wars release felt like a global conversation. Even the Disney Vault was built around one powerful idea. You could not always have everything. And because you could not always have it, the product felt more valuable. Scarcity created anticipation. Anticipation created emotion. Emotion created memory. Memory created money. That was the old Disney flywheel. But streaming changed the psychology. Streaming said everything should be available now. Every movie, every show, every franchise, every spin-off, every universe, every episode, every screen, all the time. And Disney had to compete in that world. But the moment Disney entered the streaming war, the business changed. The question was no longer, can Disney create magic? The question became, can Disney produce enough content to keep subscribers from leaving? That question is dangerous because it changes the creative mission. A studio built to create unforgettable moments starts behaving like a factory built to reduce churn. And when stories become churn prevention, the audience can feel it. They may not say it in business language. They may not talk about margins or subscriber retention, but emotionally, they understand. They feel when a story exists because it needed to exist. And they feel when a story exists because a platform needed more content. That difference matters, because audiences do not fall in love with content. They fall in love with meaning. Disney's strongest stories were never powerful because they filled a schedule. They were powerful because they became emotional landmarks. They gave people characters to grow up with, songs to remember, worlds to return to, heroes to believe in, villains to fear, families to cry with. That is not the same as content volume. A spreadsheet can count titles, but it cannot count meaning. And that is where the trap began. Disney had spent decades building emotional scarcity. Then streaming pushed it toward emotional oversupply. The company had to feed Disney Plus. It had to justify the platform. It had to compete with Netflix. It had to fight for attention inside living rooms. It had to prove to Wall Street that it could own the future of entertainment. So Disney did what looked logical. It turned its most valuable intellectual property into more output. Marvel expanded. Star Wars expanded. Pixar moved into streaming. Disney Animation faced new pressure. Old franchises returned. New shows filled gaps between movies. Characters moved from theater events into weekly platform releases. And at first, this seemed powerful. Fans had more. Investors saw ambition. Subscribers had reasons to join. The platform looked richer. The library looked stronger. But culture does not work like a warehouse. More supply does not always create more demand. Sometimes, more supply destroys urgency. That is one of the most important business lessons in the Disney story. If your product is built on emotional anticipation, too much availability can weaken the very thing people loved. This is what happened to parts of Disney's franchise machine. A new Marvel release once felt like a cultural event. Then there were more movies, more series, more characters, more timelines, more required viewing, more multiverse logic, more spin-offs, more homework. The universe got bigger. But for many viewers, the emotion got weaker. That is the strange danger of expansion. A story world can become so large that it becomes harder to enter. A franchise can become so interconnected that casual viewers feel left behind. A brand can add so much that the audience stops feeling excitement and starts feeling obligation. And obligation is the enemy of entertainment. People want to watch because they care, not because they need to keep up. That is where franchise fatigue begins. Not when people suddenly hate a brand, but when the emotional cost of staying involved becomes too high. The viewer does not rage. They drift. They skip one show, then another. They tell themselves they will catch up later, then later never comes. And once the habit breaks, the empire loses power. This is how cultural control weakens. Quietly. Disney's problem was not just volume, it was the psychological effect of volume. When every story becomes part of a pipeline, the audience starts seeing the pipeline. When every franchise becomes a universe, the audience starts seeing the strategy. When every beloved character becomes another extension, the audience starts asking a dangerous question. Is this story being told because it matters, or because the machine needs more? That question can damage an entertainment brand. Because Disney's brand was built on trust. Parents trusted Disney to create magic for children. Fans trusted Pixar to deliver emotion. Marvel fans trusted the universe to build towards something meaningful. Star Wars fans trusted the mythology to feel rare, epic, and special. But trust can be stretched. If audiences feel quality is inconsistent, trust weakens. If they feel stories are being overextended, excitement weakens. If they feel every franchise is being mined until nothing feels surprising, belief weakens. And belief is the real asset, not the IP itself. The belief behind the IP. That is what powerful brands often forget. Owning characters is not the same as owning attention. Owning franchises is not the same as owning love. Owning a library is not the same as owning the future. Disney had some of the most valuable intellectual property in entertainment history. But even the strongest IP can be weakened if the audience feels it is being used too often, stretched too thin, or treated more like a revenue stream than a story. That is the business trap. A brand becomes powerful because people care. Then the company tries to monetize that care. Then the monetization becomes so visible that people care less. This is what Vexonomy calls the meaning extraction problem. The company keeps extracting value from the meaning until the meaning starts to run out. Disney's streaming push made this even more complicated. Streaming looked like freedom. No cable bundle, no schedule, no waiting, no theater ticket required. But for media companies, streaming created a brutal economic reality. The old model was built on windows. A movie could make money in theaters, then home video, then cable, then licensing, then merchandise. then parks. Each window created value. Each delay created anticipation. But streaming collapsed the windows. It trained people to expect expensive entertainment inside a monthly subscription. Suddenly, the company had to spend billions creating shows and movies, while customers judged the entire experience against the price of one subscription. That is a very different business. A theatrical hit feels like an event. A streaming title can become just another thumbnail. And that is dangerous, because thumbnails are disposable. The screen is endless. The next option is always waiting. The audience is always one click away from something else. Disney entered a market where attention was infinite, but loyalty was fragile. And in that world, even a legendary brand has to fight like everyone else. The company that once made people leave their homes for a movie now had to compete inside the same interface as every other show, every other platform, every other distraction, and every other algorithm. That changed the relationship. Disney was no longer only creating cultural events, it was fighting for watch time. And watch time is a colder business than wonder. Wonder asks, what will people remember? Watch time asks, what will keep people subscribed? Those are not the same question. And when companies confuse them, quality often suffers. This is where the $100 billion content trap becomes clear. It is not only about one exact budget line. It is about the logic of a system where entertainment giants pour tens of billions into content over multiple years because the platform must always be fed. Disney reported more than $20 billion in annual produced and licensed content spending in recent years. The streaming business also absorbed years of heavy losses before reaching profitability. That tells you how expensive the new entertainment war became. But the deeper problem is not just the money spent. The deeper problem is what the spending did to the psychology of the audience. When content becomes endless, attention becomes cheaper. When attention becomes cheaper, stories have to work harder. When stories have to work harder, companies produce more. And when companies produce more, the audience becomes more overwhelmed. That is the trap. The machine keeps demanding more output to solve the problem that too much output helped create. Disney did not simply enter streaming. It entered a business model that rewards volume until volume begins to weaken meaning. This is the same pattern we have seen in other empires. Tesla did not only sell cars, it sold belief in the future. Apple did not only sell a headset, it sold a vision people were not ready to live inside. Amazon did not only sell convenience, it faced a consumer who became too financially anxious to care about speed. Nike did not only sell sneakers, it sold desire, then weakened desire through overexposure. And Disney did not only sell stories, it sold magic, then risked turning magic into inventory. That is why this episode matters, because the same pattern keeps appearing. A company becomes powerful by owning emotion. Then it tries to scale that emotion. Then the scaling process changes what made the emotion powerful in the first place. That is how empires lose control. Not because they become unknown, but because they become too available, too predictable, too optimized, too visible, too familiar. And in entertainment, familiarity can be deadly. A child can watch the same movie 100 times, but an audience does not want to feel like a company is giving them the same emotional formula 100 times. There is a difference between timeless and repetitive. Disney built timeless stories. Streaming pressured it to build repeatable content. That difference is everything. Timeless stories age into memory. Repeatable content ages into noise. The audience feels it. They may not explain it. But they know when magic feels manufactured. They know when a universe feels stretched. They know when a sequel exists because the brand is valuable, not because the story is necessary. They know when a platform has more titles, but fewer moments. That is the emotional danger Disney faced. More content did not automatically mean more connection. More franchises did not automatically mean more loyalty. More subscription options did not automatically mean more love. Because love is not built by volume. Love is built by meaning. And meaning needs discipline. It needs restraint. It needs patience. It needs the courage to say no. That may be the hardest lesson for a media empire. Sometimes the most profitable story is the one you do not rush. Sometimes the strongest franchise is the one you do not overextend. Sometimes the best way to protect a brand is to leave the audience wanting more. That sounds simple, but it is almost impossible when investors want growth. Platforms need content, creators need projects, subscribers need reasons to stay, and competitors are producing non-stop. This is the impossible balance Disney had to manage: quality versus quantity, scarcity versus availability, franchise expansion versus franchise fatigue, creative risk versus brand safety, streaming growth versus profitability, nostalgia versus originality. The old Disney machine was built on patience. The new media environment rewards speed, and speed is dangerous for a company whose greatest asset is emotion, because emotion cannot always be rushed. A great Disney story often needs time to develop characters, time to build worlds, time to make music unforgettable, time to create emotional stakes, time to make people care. But the streaming war did not reward patience. It rewarded constant engagement. And constant engagement can turn art into supply chain management. That is the brutal truth of modern entertainment. The audience says it wants more, but what it really wants is more that matters. The platform says it needs content, but what the brand needs is memory. The market says it wants growth, but what the company needs is trust. If those forces fall out of balance, the brand starts paying a hidden price. Disney's correction shows that even the company understood the danger. The message became clearer: less output, more quality, fewer Marvel projects, more focus, more discipline, less waste, more profitability. That shift matters because it reveals the mistake. The problem was never simply that Disney needed more stories. The problem was that Disney needed better reasons for those stories to exist. This is the business lesson. If you run a business, do not confuse production with value. Do not confuse activity with progress. Do not confuse more offers with more loyalty. Do not confuse more visibility with more meaning. A brand does not become stronger just because customers see it more often. Sometimes, seeing it too often makes it less powerful. If your business is built on trust, protect trust. If it is built on emotion, protect emotion. If it is built on community, protect the feeling of belonging. If it is built on premium value, protect scarcity. Because the thing that makes people love your brand is often the thing you accidentally destroy when you chase growth too aggressively. That is what Disney's content trap teaches. The customer does not only ask, "How much can I watch?" The customer asks, "Why should I care?" And when a company cannot answer that question, content becomes noise. Disney is still powerful. Disney still has parks. Disney still has characters. Disney still has franchises. Disney still has some of the most valuable entertainment assets on Earth. This is not the end of Disney, but it is a warning. Even the strongest emotional empire can weaken its own magic if it treats attention like a resource to be harvested instead of a relationship to be protected. That is the Vexonomy lesson. A company does not lose power only when people stop recognizing its brand. Sometimes it loses power when people recognize the machine behind the brand. When the formula becomes visible, when the magic feels scheduled, when the story feels like inventory, when the audience realizes it is not being invited into a world, it is being retained as a subscriber, that is when the spell begins to break. Disney's greatest challenge is not convincing people that it was magical. Everyone already knows that. The challenge is convincing people that the magic is still alive now. Because nostalgia can bring people back once, but only meaning can keep them there. The past can make a brand beloved, but only the future can keep it powerful. Disney did not run out of stories. It fell into the trap of producing too many stories that did not feel necessary enough. And in the modern content economy, that is the danger every creator, company, and empire must understand. More is not always growth. Sometimes more is how the meaning disappears. Do not subscribe because Disney spent billions chasing streaming. Subscribe if you want to understand the pattern before the next empire repeats it. This is Vexonomy, the psychology of wealth, power, and the systems quietly controlling how the world behaves, because the next empire is already making the same mistake. This is Vexonomy.